A cold sandwich in first class. Was it mere oversight or intentional? Follow the powerful CEO as she boards a fateful flight, a billion-dollar contract in hand, only to be served a cheap meal. The sting of mistreatment, the silence of cold glances, and then, from her phone screen, a quiet confrontation begins, where right and wrong aren't settled by words, but by undeniable numbers. Curious about what happens next, Jade Everhart stepped lightly through the airplane door, each footfall blending with the soothing hum of the first-class cabin. The scent of fine leather mingled with the gentle aroma of French rose tea she often savored before long flights. Soft golden light from the overhead fixtures glinted off her impeccably tailored navy suit, accentuating her tall, slender frame. Every detail was flawless. The luxurious leather of Seat 1A, the intricately folded dining table, and the silver-embossed menu tray at her right. This was her familiar domain, where Jade Everhart reminded herself that the pinnacle wasn't a gift bestowed upon her. It was a height she'd claimed through the steady strides of her career. As her carry-on was neatly stowed in the overhead compartment, Jade's gaze swept over the other passengers. Across the aisle, Archer Beaumont chatted with his assistant over the phone. Thatcher Langley sipped champagne before turning to jot down notes. Huxley Rowe smiled while reading the financial news. They were busy, they were prominent, but for Jade Everhart, none mattered more than the contract already drafted on the tablet she clutched tightly. This flight would take her to Geneva, where a billion-dollar AI technology deal, 2 years in the making, awaited. The warm cabin lighting couldn't fully dispel her subtle anticipation. Each time her hand rested on the table, she quickly reviewed the emailed meal confirmations: lobster bisque, 27, prime steak, 14, Chateau Margaux, 2015. It wasn't just a meal, it was a statement. Black woman could command any space traditionally reserved for those accustomed to power. Every tightly coiled curl pinned neatly at her nape, every meticulously fastened jacket button embodied Jade Everhart's unyielding resolve. When the first-class attendant appeared, her steps were deliberate yet relaxed. "Hello, I'm Quinn Ashfield, your attendant today," she introduced herself confidently, but Quinn's eyes betrayed a fleeting glance, as if saying, "This is just routine." Her polished greeting, like a thin veil, didn't dim Jade Everhart's determined smile, yet in that moment, a subtle tension stirred within her. Waiting quietly, Jade maintained her routine, opening Morgan Tech's internal app to check the latest updates from the Geneva office. She didn't bother with the menu again. Numbers, code, and airtight contract terms were her true focus. A meal could be delayed or botched, but a signed deal permitted no errors. Quinn Ashfield's footsteps approached again. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we're out of the main course today," she said calmly, her smile strained. "We only have cold chicken sandwiches and water." The slight wasn't staggering, but it ignited every sense within Jade. A cold chicken sandwich and water, items she'd rarely glanced at, now symbolized a subtle dismissal. A brief silence followed, only the steady beat of her heart audible. Jade didn't scowl or raise her voice. She calmly closed her tablet, her eyes fixed on the completed meal confirmation. "I received confirmation last week," she said softly. Email, reference number, reminders, all in order. Her words were sharp as a blade, yet her tone remained composed. Quinn's eyes flickered briefly before she cleared her throat, offering an apology without admitting fault. In the cabin, the faint clink of glasses and lively chatter of elite passengers continued. The conversations of the affluent passengers continued, but for Jade Everhart the world seemed to pause. The lights, the stories, the deference shown to the white men nearby couldn't erase the invisible slights she'd just endured. She didn't bow her head or avert her gaze from Quinn Ashfield's retreating figure. Instead, Jade Everhart slowly placed her hand on her smartwatch. The small screen flared to life as she sent an urgent command. Audit Flight 917, Crew ID QA472. Each word on the screen was a cold brick in the wall of justice she was building. She didn't need to shout to be heard. This action was her voice, resonant and undeniable. The soft chime of the takeoff announcement sounded. The cabin door closed, and the air shifted from stillness to a gentle hum as the crew moved about. Jade Everhart leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes, but her mind replayed every detail. The dismissive expression, the fleeting glance, sketched into her memory. She wasn't a passenger prone to complaints. She was a woman who'd built a tech empire, keenly aware of every step she took. The plane glided down the runway, the wind softly rattling the cabin. Jade Everhart opened her eyes, gazing out the fogged window. Geneva lay ahead, and a seemingly trivial in-flight meal had sparked the beginning of a quiet revolution. She smiled. The luxury aviation industry might not be ready for change, but Jade Everhart was. The air in the first-class cabin grew heavier as Jade Everhart lifted her gaze, her eyes scanning every detail. The meticulously folded table linens, the gleaming crystal glassware, the artfully arranged trays of other passengers' meals. Across the aisle, Archer Beaumont savored his caviar, each delicate spoonful a shimmering white against the dark bed of roe. Down the row, Thatcher Langley chatted animatedly with his assistant, his chuckles mingling with the soft smack of his lips as he sipped champagne. Not far off, Huxley Rowe was engrossed in financial news, his fingers deftly tapping the tablet screen. The scene, a symphony of opulent flavors and privileged gestures, seemed orchestrated to highlight the invisible divide between them and Jade Everhart. She sat upright, hands resting calmly on her lap, exuding absolute composure, but no detail escaped her notice. The way Quinn Ashfield leaned in to pour champagne for Archer Beaumont, her eyes briefly skimming past Jade before lingering longer on the white passengers behind. The warm glow of the cabin lights couldn't soften the cold flicker in those eyes, a glance that seemed to say, "This isn't your place." For a moment, the laughter and clinking of glasses formed a mocking soundtrack to this subtle theater of discrimination. Jade Everhart refused to waver. She exhaled softly, attuned to every sound, every breath around her. The calls of white passengers, the crisp slice of bread placed on trays, the quiet sigh of the male attendant, Bennett Thorne, as he deftly met an overzealous businessman's demands. Her eyes darted to the Diamond Plus membership list, a number that wasn't just a rank but proof of how often she'd entrusted this airline with her loyalty, and that very frequency made her treatment all the more unacceptable. A wave of familiar fatigue washed over her, a sensation she'd felt in boardroom meetings, in project pitches where she, a black woman, stood before a sea of white men. But this wasn't a moment to falter. Jade closed her eyes for a few seconds, whispering to herself. This is just the beginning. She reopened the Morgan Tech app, tracking the audit report's progress, charts comparing service times, complaint frequencies, and Quinn Ashfield's employee code, numbers that coldly exposed the disparities. In the cabin, Quinn Ashfield returned with another serving tray, bowing to a white passenger, her hands swiftly arranging napkins and checking orders. Her smile remained polite, but Jade Everhart saw through its forced veneer. Nearby, Bennett Thorne assisted with equal fervor, bowing as if serving a deity. No one checked on her, no one spared a word, as her crystal glass sat untouched. Belonging to another world, the feeling within her deepened, crystallizing into resolve. Jade Everhart didn't need fanfare or applause. She simply catalogued every detail. The delay times, the number of pours, the steps between the attendants and her seat. Each measured breath, each steady pulse, mirrored her unrelenting determination. Once the data was compiled, the system could no longer stay silent. She recalled the advice of Sloane Carrington, her senior assistant. Every action is evidence. A quiet smile stirred within her. Jade placed her hand on her smartwatch, and with a swift motion, she sent another command for prioritized behavioral analysis. Priority scan, Flight 917, Crew QA472 and BT 1145, she typed. The small screen flashed a confirmation. It was a decisive move, executed with flawless precision. A soft chime signaled the appetizer course. As others eagerly awaited their plates, Jade Everhart gave the tray a cursory glance. The appetizer, no matter how lavish, was merely a pretext to expose the system. Her eyes flicked to the delicate shrimp pastries, narrowing slightly as she caught Quinn Ashfield's fleeting hesitation while serving. That was the moment she needed, a rare pause, a faint crack in the polished facade Stratus prided itself on. Finally, as the folding table was lowered with precision, while Archer Beaumont placed half a shrimp on his plate and Thatcher Langley raised a toast, Jade Everhart knew the stage was set. Every glance seemed to turn toward her, not out of respect, but curiosity. She met no one's gaze, maintaining her poised demeanor, her posture unwavering, and a subtle, invisible smile, the smile of someone who knew she'd become the catalyst for change. In that moment, the first-class cabin was no longer a place of stifled tension, but the epicenter of an unnamed upheaval. Jade Everhart closed her tablet, accepting the appetizer as scheduled, but in her heart, the service system was about to face a far greater question. When disparity is laid bare, who will be held accountable? 1,000 doors of power could slam shut, but Jade Everhart knew it took only one crack, and she would be the one to widen it. The first-class cabin felt as sterile as a courtroom as Jade Everhart gently closed her tablet, her eyes still catching the faint glow of the cabin lights as she stared ahead. Beneath the soft golden hue, complaint data flickered on her screen. 2 years, 3 grievances from passengers of color, 4 delayed services, 6 instances of overlooked priority. Each number wasn't just cold data, but a drop on the scales of justice Jade Everhart was meticulously balancing. She tapped a command, and the message "Emergency Audit Protocol Activated" flashed brightly. Minutes later, halfway across the globe, Sloane Carrington hunched over a sea of spreadsheets. Her computer screen pulsed with intricate commands, service time comparisons, complaint categorizations, internal email extractions. "Swap the dish instead of apologizing," read an old email from Quinn Ashfield, the words cutting like a blade under the harsh white glow of the monitor. Sloane jotted it down, each keystroke ringing like a gavel's strike. Scanning the attendance file, she spotted the phrase, "Serve VIP first" in a memo. Names omitted, but the undercurrent of bias laid bare. Meanwhile, Jade Everhart drew a quiet breath, her gaze lifting to the plane ceiling as if seeking the open sky beyond. The faint herbal tea scent lingered from a nearby tray, but her mind remained fixed. Every action must be recorded, every detail fought for. She recalled Sloane's words from that morning. "Let the data speak for us." And now, she executed that advice with chilling calm. Before her, passengers savored their appetizers. Archer Beaumont nodded approvingly at the seafood's freshness, while Thatcher Langley mused about Asian market trends. Laughter and soft sighs drifted through, but no one mentioned the cold sandwich once offered as her premier dinner. Jade leaned slightly, her discerning eyes sweeping over Quinn Ashfield's face as she bent over a tray. That moment wasn't for reminiscing. It was for confirming this service lapse wasn't an accident but part of a carefully constructed pattern of prejudice. On her tablet, an analytics graph materialized. The y-axis tracked complaints, the x-axis time. The stark red bars from the last 3 flights burned like candles of accusation. Below, customer comments. "Forgotten in the cabin. No one checked on me. Only offered cheap food." Were meticulously curated by Sloane into a catalog. She tagged, sorted, and linked the involved crew. saving it as a secure PDF. In the cabin, Jade Everhart showed no impatience. She lightly held a mocktail, but a silent fury simmered within. She didn't shout or lash out. Rage was futile without evidence. She only needed to await Sloane's analysis, who was typing the final report lines. Recommendation: immediate suspension of crew, QA 472, escalation to ethics board, reorganize service protocol. Morgan-Tech's Manhattan office halted all other meetings to address an email baldly titled, "Urgent Flight 917 Audit Initiated." As the lights signaled the main course's approach, Jade Everhart sat patiently. She didn't count the plates served or glasses poured for others. Those only broadened the canvas. Her focus was the hidden details. Attitudes, expressions, service disparities. She discreetly recorded audio, snapped covert photos, everything preserved until Stratus Air's board could no longer deny it. In New York, Sloane Carrington finalized the report. The first page bore a concise summary. The next detailed every incident, number and email. Complaint history spans 24 months, she wrote. No disciplinary action taken. Everything was logically arranged, primed for the impending battle of wits. She clicked send to CEO Sterling Hollis, legal advisor's ethics committee, and the report shot through satellite signals, indelible. The cabin quieted as Jade Everhart pressed the call button for another attendant. Bennett Thorne appeared, his steps steady but his eyes uneasy as she inquired about delayed service frequency. Jade didn't wait for a reply. She offered a cold smile and turned away. It wasn't submission, it was a marker that she held the upper hand. No excuse could stand against the mountain of data and proof. A soft ding signaled the email's delivery. Jade Everhart closed her eyes, leaning into the headrest. The silent anger within her wasn't a roaring wave, but a smoldering abyss, deep enough to topple an entire discriminatory system. She didn't glance at the fogged window. Beyond it lay Geneva's peaks, where the investigation's terms would be hashed out. And when the plane landed, Stratus Air's elite would face the tremors sparked by this chain of data, a quiet fury impossible to conceal. The first-class cabin fell silent as Jade Everhart pressed the call button. The solemn ding echoed like an invitation to a wordless duel, where every tone and gesture was meticulously weighed. Bennett Thorne appeared, his steps steady, but his eyes betraying a flicker of hesitation. He carried a new tray with a medium-rare steak and a glass of Chateau Margaux still steaming. The lavish meal couldn't mask the anomaly, like a thin mist failing to conceal a towering mountain range. Jade Everhart didn't rush. She maintained just enough distance, her gaze direct but not harsh. The cabin's speakers hummed soft background music, but between them only steady breaths, and the faint chime of her smartwatch receiving a message filled the space. She asked calmly, "Mr. Thorne, could you explain the priority protocol when premium meals run short on a flight?" Her voice was even, devoid of anger, but each word cut like a scalpel. Bennett Thorne froze, lowering the tray slightly. The overhead lights glinted off his gray vest, highlighting every crease. He cleared his throat and replied, "Per protocol, we prioritize based on booking time and membership tier." His words came quickly, as if trying to fill a void in his response. Jade Everhart smiled, a smile that lit up her face but rattled the nerves of the man before her. She pressed gently, "I'm a Diamond Plus member. Booked my meal 7 days ago, confirmed via email and text. Why was I the only one not served?" Her tone remained calm, but the question carried weight, like steady rain tapping a window, exposing every crack. Bennett Thorne bowed his head, his eyes darting to the plane's window, blinking as if hoping for salvation from the blue sky beyond. "It could be a system error or priority for frequent flyers," he stammered, avoiding Jade's gaze. His words were like a wheel slipping, lacking the traction to pull the system from its prejudiced skid. The other passengers paid no mind. Archer Beaumont sipped his wine, nodding as if affirming the service's perfection. Thatcher Langley scrolled his phone, jotting notes about stable Asian markets. Huxley Rowe waved for a hot towel. Everything proceeded as usual, except for the thick silence between Jade Everhart and Bennett Thorne. She didn't retract her question. Jade closed her eyes briefly, sensing every subtle shift. The hesitant glance, the halted breath. Then she opened them and added, "If it's not discrimination, what evidence supports objective prioritization? I'd like this exchange recorded." Her voice remained smooth like a Baroque melody, allowing no errors to slip through. Bennett Thorne wavered, his hand trembling as he set down a knife meant for another passenger. "We follow internal guidelines, but there may be exceptions." His faltering voice tried to patch the gaps, each exception a pebble obstructing the path to fairness. Without another word, Jade Everhart gave a slight nod, signaling she'd grasped the issue. She pulled out her smartphone, opened the recording app, and placed it face down on the table. A small rec icon glowed in the corner. The action was subtle but clear. Bennett knew his words couldn't vanish into thin air. The air thickened like molasses as Jade shifted topics. "Are you aware of the complaint history for cabin QA 472? A fierce glint flashed in his eyes. "I don't have that data here," he mumbled, clinging to professionalism, though his face paled. In truth, Sloane Carrington had already sent the file to CEO Sterling Hollis. Jade Everhart closed her phone, her gaze sweeping over her tray as if chastising the system's silence. She was like a judge, needing no gavel. Her look alone delivered the verdict. A faint clink sounded as Bennett set the tray down, bowed, and retreated quietly. The brief exchange had exposed every imbalance. A moment of silence lingered before Jade Everhart pulled out her tablet, opening the priority incident file she and Sloane had prepared. The text "Priority Review, QA 472" stood bold, followed by evidence, booking emails, texts, slides comparing her service times to 3 white passengers. Every detail was precise, down to the second. The cabin lights shifted from gold to blue, signaling the tension's peak had passed. Jade Everhart didn't need to declare victory. Her actions, questioning, recording, presenting evidence, spoke for themselves. From across the aisle, Archer Beaumont and Thatcher Langley glanced over, not out of curiosity, but because, for the first time, they sensed something amiss in the flawless service they enjoyed. As Bennett vanished behind the cabin door, Jade Everhart tucked her tablet into her jacket, a satisfied smile flickering. She didn't need to shout or protest loudly. Victory lay in her meticulous preparation, in the trap-like questions she posed. Stratus Air could no longer ignore the truth. They'd been exposed by the very language, timing, and damning silence of those who'd been overlooked. The first-class cabin hummed with the soft whir of fans and murmured conversations, but for Jade Everhart, time seemed to slow, making way for the numbers. On her tablet, a graph compared service times, a blue column for passengers like Archer Beaumont, Thatcher Langley, and Huxley Rowe, and a stark red one for her cold tray. Each line in hue accused the imbalance. Her finger traced the timestamps: 42 seconds for Beaumont's champagne, 6 minutes 11 seconds for her sandwich. These weren't just numbers. They narrated her being overlooked in a cabin where luxury was supposedly equal, but only for a select few. Minutes earlier, Sloane Carrington at Morgan Tech had sent the first compiled report. Emails, surveys, even covert photos from other passengers were packaged into a PDF titled Discrepancy Report, Flight 917. Jade opened it, the summary glaring. 6 incidents of meal omission, 3 passenger complaints, 0 apologies. The final line cut deep. No system-generated alerts were triggered. Her heart didn't skip, but her resolve flared like a smoldering flame. She was no longer just a passenger. She was the orchestrator of a domino chain teetering on the edge. Jade expanded the analysis. Quinn Ashfield's name, IDQA 472 appeared with 2 complaints in past 6 months. No formal action. She glanced at the white passengers snapping photos of their appetizers. Her eyes held no malice, only a question. If the system doesn't flag it, who's accountable? Without delay, Jade tapped red line 917 on her secure internal app, a privileged command reserved for dire emergencies. Instantly, a red alert flashed on Sloane Carrington's screen, prompting her to rise mid-meeting in New York. Received. Priority audit protocol. The message relayed to CEO Sterling Hollis and Stratus Air's legal team. Within seconds, the email, urgent, Flight 917, mission relay, red line review, landed in the inboxes of top executives, from Coraline Wynn, head of service culture, to Griffin Marlowe, Europe regional director. In the cabin, all seemed serene. Quinn Ashfield glided through the aisles, unaware she was now the focal point of an investigation. Her practiced smile accompanied lavish trays to tables filled with laughter. Meanwhile, Jade Everhart left her medium-rare steak untouched, letting it cool to underscore an invisible line. First class was no place for prejudice. She observed, noted, and awaited the system's response. A ping from her smartwatch signaled an email. Audit protocol acknowledged. ETA 5 minutes to Geneva. The cabin's air grew denser. Quinn Ashfield's steps on the red carpet sounding heavier. The overhead lights turned colder, highlighting the contrast between sumptuous meals and her sandwich. Jade closed her tablet, her gaze drifting to the fogged window. The tension had shifted from her chest to the very fabric of the passengers' suits, as if the cabin awaited a silent explosion. She registered every sound. The mini fridge's click, a young passenger rummaging through a bag, Beaumont's sip of wine. Each amplified the disparity. As the plane descended, the pilot's calm yet firm announcement rang out. "We're preparing to land in Geneva. Please fasten your seatbelts." It was like a bell signaling the audit's final phase. Jade leaned back, closing her eyes to center herself. In her mind, the dominoes were tipping, awaiting the last push. The tray, the urgent email, the formal apology, all poised to surface. At that moment, Sloane Carrington in Manhattan finalized a summary slide. Flight 917, summary dashboard. A graph showing the percentage of correctly served passengers filled the senior cabin crew manager's headset. The 0% for Jade's premium meal order was jarring. Below, the outline read, "Immediate suspension of QA 472 pending investigation." In the cabin, as the slide faintly reflected on a small control panel, Jade Everhart allowed a faint smile. She needed no fanfare or megaphone. 3 screen taps and precise data had laid the groundwork for a service culture overhaul. As the wheels kissed the tarmac, the metallic clank heralded a new chapter. The cabin door cracked open, ready for the emergency audit team's footsteps, and Jade knew the invisible dominoes were set to fall. The plane taxied to the gate, sunlight slanting through the windows. All eyes turned to the boarding door. Quinn Ashfield still smiled, oblivious that her rare first-class badge teetered on the red thread of red line 917. And as Jade Everhart stepped onto Geneva's tarmac, unhurried, she held undeniable proof. The domino chain had fulfilled its mission. The air in Stratus Air's Geneva boardroom was thick, the fluorescent lights carving sharp beams onto the glass table. Jade Everhart entered, her tall, slender frame commanding in a pristine white suit, her gaze detached yet authoritative. Before her, CEO Sterling Hollis stood solemnly by the long table, dozens of charts and slides flickering on a large screen. Sloane Carrington's soft footsteps echoed as she followed, carrying the final Flight 917 Behavioral Discrimination Report. All eyes turned to Jade Everhart as she gracefully took the head seat. The room was deathly silent, save for the faint hum of cameras and the steady breaths of the few attendees. Sterling Hollis spoke first, his voice slightly hoarse. "Thank you for coming promptly, Ms. Everhart. We've received your team's report." Jade didn't respond immediately. She reached into her jacket, placing a small USB on the table. "The original files," she said, her voice soft but commanding attention. "Videos, emails, passenger statements, and internal crew responses." Coraline Wynn, head of service culture, furrowed her brow, leaning toward the USB as if it were an enigmatic orb. On the screen, Sloan Carrington opened the first slide. Emergency Audit Protocol, Flight 917. Below was a data breakdown. 12 flights linked to QA 4722, 6 formal complaints, 0 actions taken. Next, an email excerpt between Quinn Ashfield and a colleague. "Serve premium customers first. Avoid time-consuming guests." The bold red text deepened the room's tension. Sterling Hollis's face shifted. He bowed his head briefly, then looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "I don't want to misunderstand," he said slowly. "We pride ourselves on first-class service. But now, the truth is clear." The room held its breath, awaiting the next move. Jade Everhart spoke, her tone grave. "This isn't just about Quinn Ashfield. It's the root of a culture long nurtured in your system. When service is divided by skin color, priority policies become tools of discrimination." She didn't raise her voice. Each word struck the silence with unyielding truth. Bennett Thorne glanced at Jade, seeking a lifeline. He inhaled deeply, muttering, "We didn't realize the severity." His voice faltered, and in that moment, all excuses seemed to dissolve. Coraline Wynn stood, moving to the screen to play a video of Quinn Ashfield saying, "Maybe the system forgot," with a smirk as Jade presented her Diamond Plus card. Each second tightened the attendees' gazes. Thatcher Langley forced a smile. Archer Beaumont nodded faintly, both tinged with shame. As the video ended, soft gasps escaped a few male executives. Jade Everhart didn't judge. She rested her hand on the cold wooden table. "Now is the time to act," she said. "I don't want apologies. I want commitments. Suspend QA 472 immediately. Investigate all related flights and overhaul unconscious bias training." Her voice was strong enough to make fear retreat. Sterling Hollis raised a hand, his eyes resolute. "Effective immediately. All crew will undergo mandatory training. I also invite you, Ms. Everhart, to serve as an independent consultant for this program." The offer marked a pivotal shift. Sloan Carrington scribbled swiftly. "Formal directives confirmed. Immediate suspension of QA 4722. Comprehensive training on unconscious bias. Establish direct feedback channel for VIP customers." Each item flashed on the screen. A manifesto for a new era. The room suddenly glowed with a different light, no longer cold but tinged with golden hope. In Florida, 16-year-old Willow Hartley, once inspired by Jade's letter, watched via livestream, her smile blooming as change took shape. Griffin Marlowe, Europe Regional Director, nodded approvingly. "We'll issue a statement immediately. This must reach every employee. No secrecy." Coraline Wynn echoed his nod, her hands trembling but her eyes alight. The meeting closed in unanimous agreement. Jade Everhart rose, her fingers grazing the table's edge. She didn't rush to gather her things, instead turning to Sterling Hollis. "Thank you for listening, but don't let promises stay on paper. Show me results in 3 months." Her voice was a challenge, a testament to unrelenting will. Sterling Hollis nodded slowly, his face etched with commitment. Jade remained composed, her gaze shifting to the boardroom door where reporters waited. The service revolution had begun, and she would oversee every step. As the door opened, hallway lights spilled in, tracing a path for change. Jade Everhart stepped out, leaving behind not just a boardroom, but a culture in need of rebirth. The world's atmosphere shifted over a single cold sandwich. News flooded Jade Everhart's tablet like a torrential cascade. A bold headline from the New York Times struck first. Black CEO discriminated against on first-class flight. Power is no longer silent. The words rang like a manifesto, sparking a flurry of editorials and fervent commentary. The Guardian followed with a vivid blue title, "One Denied Premium Meal and the Entire Luxury Service System is Exposed." Forbes roared in, "How Jade Everhart Turned a Cold Sandwich into a Global Service Reform." Each article was a stone hurled at the cramped wall of silence in the luxury aviation industry, so jarring that even Archer Beaumont, Thatcher Langley, and Huxley Rowe paused, setting down their phones to reread, ensuring it wasn't fake news. Never had the media erupted like this. On Twitter, Seat 1A blazed into existence, flooding timelines from New York to Tokyo, London to Sydney. Over 2 million shares in the first 12 hours. Seat 1A transcended trend status, becoming a symbol of equity and quiet power. TV pundits dissected every detail. Quinn Ashfield's glance, the sandwich tray, Bennett Thorne's stammered response. A host declared, "This isn't just a service failure, it's a global dialogue on invisible bias." In-depth reports paired with infographics paired with passenger service times made the undeniable disparity crystal clear. Public pressure surged like a tidal wave. Sterling Hollis's inbox, Stratus Air's CEO, overflowed with demands. "We want change now." Investor Griffin Marlowe, representing a European fund, issued an emailed warning, "Without comprehensive reform in 48 hours, we'll reconsider our investment." The U.S. Transportation Secretary, a political ally, called directly, demanding a report on aviation service culture and warning this cannot persist. Like a storm engulfing Stratus Air, pressure from media, politicians, and financiers thrust the airline into the eye of a hurricane, forcing them to embrace change as one welcomes dawn. Amid the news tempest, a community campaign rose like a hymn of hope. Willow Hartley, the 16-year-old inspired by Jade's handwritten letter, posted a photo of a sandwich tray captioned, "I don't sit in seat 1A, but I deserve respect." Her post went viral, amplified by artists, athletes, and entrepreneurs worldwide. Thousands of tearful, stirring stories poured in. A black doctor on her first-class flight, a female tech startup writer, a single mother stepping into priority class. Each ended with, "Because I deserve my own seat 1A." This invisible cohort, though not on the same flight, formed a united front for justice. A small youth group, sparked by Willow Hartley, hosted a 24-hour live stream inviting those who'd faced discrimination to share. A hospitality student wept, recalling cold service. An activist spoke of enduring silent hours for years. The chat exploded with support and pledges to sign a petition for the Global Aviation Alliance. Their voices not shouting but steady, like a gentle yet powerful wave, swept away prejudice. On industry forums, corporate culture experts urged Stratus Air to hire diversity specialists and engage communities to restructure training. Coraline Wynn, leading Stratus's reform, admitted in an interview, "We didn't see the problem's roots. Now we listen and act." Her belated statement fueled the message, "When the public speaks, nothing can stay sidelined." Jade Everhart watched it unfold on her tablet from a Geneva lakeside hotel, her fingers tapping supportive comments, proud to see Seat 1A coalition in action. Everything seemed perfect, yet she knew much remained. Sloan Carrington beside her beamed as petition signatures topped 100,000, while Stratus's VIP feedback survey logged 90 reform demands. These weren't just stats, they were the breath of an unstoppable movement. As the sun set over Lake Lemon, painting the water red, a group of women of color in New York, connected by Willow Hartley, met virtually with Jade to plan the next step, launching the Seat 1A Foundation to fund diversity training in premium service industries. Young, hopeful faces stared into cameras, declaring, "We want to be the voice for those who remain silent." Their words echoed like a chorus, linking continents, from Geneva's peaks to Manhattan's avenues, from Senate halls to Seoul's small cafes. The call for equity spread, carrying a hopeful energy. If one person stands, the current can shift. Across the globe, Seat 1A wasn't just a campaign. It was a symbol of timely action and borderless unity. As night fell, Jade Everhart smiled, knowing each story, tier, and hashtag had transformed a personal moment into a historic movement, opening a new chapter for a more humane service culture. As dawn broke over Lake Lehman, its mirror-like surface reflecting the first rays of sunlight, the luxury aviation industry quietly ushered in a new chapter. Stratus Air's first-class culture reform program announcement appeared seamlessly on the work screens of over 22,000 employees. A document not just branded with a logo, but carrying a manifesto. All invisible biases will be eradicated. The bold text was like ink sealing a vow, reminding every attendant and manager that unconscious bias training was no longer optional but mandatory. Jade Everhart sat in a small hotel meeting room, a steaming cup of herbal tea before her. She recalled her challenge to Sterling Hollis. 3 months from now, I want results. 3 months wasn't long, but it was enough to spark a journey of change. Numbers weren't the sole measure. The execution, unity, and proactive mindset were the true benchmarks of success. She tapped an email from Coraline Wynn. "Training modules ready for pilot rollout next week." The words brimmed with hope for a new generation of attendants, people who didn't just serve meals but understood human value. On the first test flight, Seat 1A bore a small plaque engraved with 3 words, "Reserved Seat of Change." Instead of a passenger's name, it symbolized a commitment. "We remember you." The silver plaque gleamed under cabin lights, declaring that not just people but even cabin fixtures joined in affirming equality. As Jade Everhart boarded, she saw that passengers of color, women, or anyone once overlooked were now visibly acknowledged. A large screen played a video chronicling the Seat 1A journey. From Quinn Ashfield's sandwich tray to Bennett Thorne's flustered response, culminating in millions of likes and shares, the movement had spread across over 50 countries, becoming a global icon. Soft applause rose from the test flight's crew, not for the meal, but for a new humane service standard. Across the globe, Willow Hartley lit a candle in her small Florida room, beside the handwritten letter Jade had sent her. The flame wasn't just light, it was a symbol of her dream, ignited by the words, "You have the right to sit in Seat 1A." Now, with each person seen, the candle flared brighter, illuminating paths for other dreams. Geneva's runway rumbled with landing gear. The test phase ended, but the reform chapter was just beginning. Archer Beaumont, Thatcher Langley, and Huxley Rowe boarded, their once casual glances replaced by respectful nods. Their greeting, "Good afternoon, Miss Everhart," affirmed that policies were being enforced. It was a fragile yet historic moment, as crew uniforms took on the mantle of equitable service. In London, Griffin Marlowe received a report. 95% of passengers served on time, regardless of gender or race. The figure wasn't just steady growth, but a leap from prior disparities. Coraline Wynn noted, "Feedback loop for VIP customers open 24/7, live monitoring via AI analytics." AI no longer just secured evidence. It now detected early signs of unfair service, issuing alerts for discrepancies in timing or attitude. The Redefining Luxury Summit followed the test flight. Jade Everhart, in a pristine white dress, stood on a minimalist stage with only the Seat 1A Coalition logo as backdrop. She spoke briefly. "Luxury must be inclusive. True power lies in how we treat everyone." Her voice resonated, rippling through the hall. Leaders from 5-star hotels to luxury cruise lines listened intently, knowing that in this era, Luxury must be tied to humane values. Simultaneously, Sloan Carrington announced the Seat 1A Foundation, offering scholarships and training for minority youth, funded by partner corporations inspired by Jade Everhart and activists like Willow Hartley. Its slogan, "Empowering Voices, Elevating Service," stood bold, proclaiming that luxury wasn't just a credit card. It was the right to respect and recognition. As dusk painted Lake Lehman pink, Jade Everhart sat on her balcony, picking up pebbles from the railing, like flipping through memories, from the first denied sandwich to each step toward change. She smiled, seeing Willow Hartley's tearful, radiant eyes on a live stream. This wasn't one person's revolution. It was the collective pulse of a community, where even the smallest voice could stir a storm in first class. As night fell, Geneva's city lights twinkled on the water. Jade knew the road ahead was long, but the new standard, luxury with dignity, was etched in stone. Every passenger, from Seat 1A to 34F, now had the right to be seen, respected, and served as a deserving human. In Geneva's pristine silence, the boarding call echoed, "Welcome aboard, where every seat is 1A." The momentum of Seat 1A didn't fade after the reform programs launched. In New York, the Washington Post hosted a social justice panel, inviting Jade Everhart via live video from Geneva. A large screen showed her at a minimalist desk, soft golden light illuminating a folder marked Seat 1A Coalition. When she declared, "We're not just changing aviation, we're changing how the world treats each other," the auditorium erupted in applause, as if endorsing a manifesto. From newsrooms to government offices, from Capitol Hill to business forums in Singapore, a movement impossible to ignore was unfolding. Simultaneously, executive offices of major airlines like Orbis Air, Aris Lux, and Celestial Airways in London, Dubai, and Tokyo issued unified statements. "We commit to making Seat 1A a global standard." Internal emails were concise but forceful. Effective immediately, mandatory unconscious bias training for all cabin crew. Implement direct feedback channels for VIP and non-VIP customers. Review seating policies for equitable treatment. Each line was a brick paving a global path to fairness in aviation. In Asia, Griffin Marlowe, the London-based fund director, conferenced with partners in Hong Kong and Singapore, urging swift adoption of the Seat 1A coalition model. Customers no longer accept outdated standards, he stressed. They demand respect in every cabin, every seat. Investment flows and trust shifted toward this strategy, as international funds began valuing airlines not just for profit but for social responsibility. Meanwhile, at a crew training facility in Washington, D.C., Corley Wynn oversaw a new simulation course. Virtual cabin screens displayed diverse passengers by race and gender. Trainees navigated scenarios with unique customer requests, receiving instant AI feedback from the Seat 1A Guardian system. Each interaction was scored on service speed, communication tone, and empathy. Trainees didn't just learn protocols, they role-played the silence many passengers endured. Each lesson ingrained not just service rules, but a commitment to equity. On social media, the campaign spilled into tourism and hospitality. Room 1A emerged as five-star hotel chains pledged suites free of bias based on nationality or membership status. Fine dining restaurants revamped seating, reserved table of change for anyone sharing stories of service inequity. The model transcended aviation, rippling across all premium sectors. In Geneva, Sloan Carrington convened a meeting between Stratus Air and human rights experts. Proposals flowed to upgrade booking software, ensuring meal allocations and service times were based on behavioral history, never forgetting a passenger. She unveiled the Willow Hartley Scholarship, funding hospitality management students to train a generation that values universal respect. Every idea, from tech to people, aimed to dissolve invisible divides between customers and staff. Industry forums published survey results. 98% of customers reported transparent, unbiased first-class service. 92% of employees felt more confident engaging diverse passengers. 85% of investors noted brand value growth from cultural commitments. These figures weren't theoretical. They were living proof of Seat 1A's impact. As autumn's chills set in, Jade Everhart boarded a flight from Cape Town to Atlanta, opting for the standard buffet without a special meal. At the aircraft door, a crew member greeted her. "Welcome back, Ms. Everhart. Your feedback matters." The words, unpolished yet sincere, felt like, "You're one of us." Seat 1A held magazines, juice, and a note. "We remember who you are." These small touches drew a quiet smile. The journey didn't end there. At a global branding summit in Dubai, Jade shared the Seat 1A story with hundreds of hotel CEOs, travel moguls, and fashion tycoons. "Luxury isn't a privilege, it's a responsibility," she said, her words igniting inspiration. Every individual from server to executive had a role in upholding and spreading equity. Late at night on a Dubai hotel balcony overlooking the Gulf, Jade's phone lit up with a message from Willow Hartley. "I just got into hospitality school with scholarship. Thank you." The brief, powerful note pulled her back to the start. A 16-year-old's faith made real. The city's twinkling lights affirmed that when people are seen and heard, life transforms. The Seat 1A legacy, born from a cold sandwich, was etched forever into premium service history, a realm where every seat, every person, holds unforgettable value. Beneath Paris's sunset sky, as the last rays gilded Notre Dame's spires, Seat 1A transcended its place as a mere front-row seat, becoming a symbol of the power of respect. Jade Everhart entered the Cabin Leadership Summit, where leaders from aviation, hospitality, entertainment, and finance converged. Her calm demeanor and unyielding gaze echoed her first moments in Stratus Air's Seat 1A. She didn't offer a greeting. Instead, she raised a metal keychain engraved with "Reserved Seat of Change" before the audience. The hall fell silent, every heart seeming to pulse in unison. The screen behind her played a short video, Quinn Ashfield's awkward delivery of a cold sandwich, transitioning to thousands of crew members trained in diversity awareness, culminating in the text, "100% cabin crew certified by Seat 1A Coalition." Applause mixed with wordless gasps filled the space, affirming the journey from a solitary sandwich to a global movement. As the video ended, Jade Everhart stepped to the podium, placing the keychain on the table, a gesture showing her journey began with one act, but crystallized in collective commitment. Her story was brief but stirring. Luxury isn't about privilege, it's about responsibility. Her voice spread like warmth, melting the frost of prejudice, making each listener feel the weight of a single, composed decision. Below the stage, Sloane Carrington's heart tightened, recalling late nights drafting audit reports with Jade, typing data to expose chilling numbers. Now, the campaign had spread beyond Stratus Air, permeating every corner of premium service. Post-summit, Griffin Marlowe met Jade privately at a tea counter. "We've witnessed unprecedented change," he congratulated. "I'll expand the Seat 1A Foundation to fund equity projects in healthcare and education." Her smile was gentle, yet resolute. Everyone deserves respect. When one person claims they're right, the system must shift. It wasn't just a promise, but a guiding principle for what lay ahead. At Geneva's Cabin Crew Training Center, diverse young trainees from across the globe lined up for the Invisible Passenger scenario crafted by Coraline Wynn. Each played a forgotten passenger, making unexpected or hesitant requests, then evaluated crew responses. The Seat 1A Guardian system analyzed facial expressions, service speed, and body language. Results reflected not just professionalism, but empathy and fairness, a tangible legacy of Jade Everhart's work. a framework valuing character as much as skill. On social media, Seat 1A coalition fueled charity efforts. Willow Hartley, now a hospitality management student in Florida, posted a video of her group teaching service communication skills in low-income areas and promoting scholarships. Online applause echoed, "Because everyone deserves to sit in Seat 1A." In Washington, D.C., Sterling Hollis and the U.S. Transportation Secretary co-hosted a session on standardizing global service ethics. New guidelines mandated that all airlines adopt Seat 1A's equity standards, with independent audits and transparent reporting. Signed like a treaty by over 50 nations, the agreement was historic. When Hollis thanked Jade Everhart, he called her not just a passenger but a pioneer, a tribute cementing her global impact. The final event was a flight from Atlanta to Tokyo, with Jade Everhart as the guest of honor. She chose Seat 10A, not 1A, to test service consistency. As she settled in, a tray arrived promptly. Champagne was poured and the crew greeted her by name with genuine warmth, no bias. It was the moment I deserve respect, became we, rippling through the cabin. Every seat, every passenger was 1A. As the plane landed at Narita, Jade gazed at skyscrapers reflecting Tokyo's nightlights. Invisible barriers, from a cold sandwich to an urgent memo, had crumbled. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the warmth of the premium leather seat, not luxury, but recognition of every individual's existence and worth. Stepping into the terminal with steady strides, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but Jade Everhart only smiled quietly. No further words were needed. Her story was a living legacy. We don't need to shout to be seen. We just act at the right moment and claim Seat 1A. In life, in work, and in each other's hearts. Thank you for joining Jade Everhart's journey, from the moment she was handed a cold sandwich to the quiet revolution that shook an entire system. I'm still in awe of the power of her resolve and commitment to justice, sparked by a few emergency audit taps. Thank you for tuning in to Millionaire and Heart Stories. Share your thoughts and visit us again to explore more inspiring tales.